the worry habit before it breaks you. Chapter 6, How to Crowd Worry Out of Your Mind. I shall never forget the night, a few years ago, when Marion J. Douglas was a student in one of my classes. I have not used his real name. He requested me, for personal reasons, not to reveal his identity. But here is his real story as he told it before one of our adult education classes. He told us how tragedy had struck at his home, not once, but twice. The first time he had lost his 5-year-old daughter, a child he adored. He and his wife thought they couldn't endure that first loss, but, as he said, 10 months later, God gave us another little girl and she died in 5 days.
This double bereavement was almost too much to bear. I couldn't take it, this father told us. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't rest or relax. My nerves were utterly shaken and my confidence gone. At last he went to doctors, one recommended sleeping pills and another recommended a trip. He tried both, but neither remedy helped. He said, my body felt as if it were encased in a vice, and the jaws of the vice were being drawn tighter and tighter. The tension of grief. If you have ever been paralyzed by sorrow, you know what he meant. But thank God, I had one child left, a 4-year-old son. He gave me the solution to my problem. One afternoon as I sat around feeling sorry for myself, he asked, Daddy, will you build a boat for me? I was in no mood to build a boat, in fact, I was in no mood to do anything. But my son is a persistent little fellow. I had to give in.
Building that toy boat took about 3 hours. By the time it was finished, I realized that those 3 hours spent building that boat were the first hours of mental relaxation and peace that I had had in months. That discovery jarred me out of my lethargy and caused me to do a bit of thinking, the first real thinking I had done in months. I realized that it is difficult to worry while you are busy doing something that requires planning and thinking. In my case, building the boat had knocked worry out of the ring. So I resolved to keep busy. The following night, I went from room to room in the house, compiling a list of jobs that ought to be done. Scores of items needed to be repaired: bookcases, stair steps, storm windows, window shades, knobs, locks, leaky taps. Astonishing as it seems, in the course of 2 weeks I had made a list of 242 items that needed attention.
During the last 2 years I have completed most of them. Besides, I have filled my life with stimulating activities. 2 nights per week I attend adult education classes in New York. I have gone in for civic activities in my hometown and I am now chairman of the school board. I attend scores of meetings. I help collect money for the Red Cross and other activities. I am so busy now that I have no time for worry. No time for worry. That is exactly what Winston Churchill said when he was working 18 hours a day at the height of the war. When he was asked if he worried about his tremendous responsibilities, he said, I'm too busy. I have no time for worry.
Charles Kettering was in that same fix when he started out to invent a self-starter for automobiles. Mr. Kettering was, until his recent retirement, vice president of General Motors in charge of the world-famous General Motors Research Corporation. But in those days, he was so poor that he had to use the hayloft of a barn as a laboratory. To buy groceries, he had to use $1,500 that his wife had made by giving piano lessons. Later, had to borrow $500 on his life insurance. I asked his wife if she wasn't worried at a time like that. Yes, she replied, I was so worried I couldn't sleep, but Mr. Kettering wasn't. He was too absorbed in his work to worry.
The great scientist, Pasteur, spoke of the peace that is found in libraries and laboratories. Why is peace found there? Because the men in libraries and laboratories are usually too absorbed in their tasks to worry about themselves. Research men rarely have nervous breakdowns. They haven't time for such luxuries. Why does such a simple thing as keeping busy help to drive out anxiety? Because of a law, one of the most fundamental laws ever revealed by psychology. And that law is, that it is utterly impossible for any human mind, no matter how brilliant, to think of more than one thing at any given time. You don't quite believe it? Very well, then, let's try an experiment. Suppose you lean right back now, close your eyes, and try, at the same instant, to think of the Statue of Liberty and of what you plan to do tomorrow morning. Go ahead, try it.
You found out, didn't you, that you could focus on either thought in turn, but never on both simultaneously? Well, the same thing is true in the field of emotions. We cannot be pepped up and enthusiastic about doing something exciting and feel dragged down by worry at the very same time. One kind of emotion drives out the other. And it was that simple discovery that enabled army psychiatrists to perform such miracles during the war. When men came out of battle so shaken by the experience that they were called psychoneurotic, army doctors prescribed keep them busy as a cure. Every waking minute of these nerve-shocked men was filled with activity, usually outdoor activity, such as fishing, hunting, playing ball, golf, taking pictures, making gardens, and dancing. They were given no time for brooding over their terrible experiences.
Occupational therapy is the term now used by psychiatry when work is prescribed as though it were a medicine. It is not new. The old Greek physicians were advocating it 500 years before Christ was born. The Quakers were using it in Philadelphia in Ben Franklin's time. A man who visited a Quaker sanatorium in 1774 was shocked to see that the patients who were mentally ill were busy spinning flax. He thought these poor unfortunates were being exploited until the Quakers explained that they found that their patients actually improved when they did a little work. It was soothing to the nerves.
Any psychiatrist will tell you that work, keeping busy, is one of the best anesthetics ever known for sick nerves. Henry W. Longfellow found that out for himself when he lost his young wife. His wife had been melting some sealing wax at a candle one day, when her clothes caught on fire. Longfellow heard her cries and tried to reach her in time, but she died from the burns. For a while, Longfellow was so tortured by the memory of that dreadful experience that he nearly went insane, but, fortunately for him, his 3 small children needed his attention. In spite of his own grief, Longfellow undertook to be father and mother to his children. He took them for walks, told them stories, played games with them, and immortalized their companionship in his poem The Children's Hour. He also translated Dante, and all these duties combined kept him so busy that he forgot himself entirely, and regained his peace of mind. As Tennyson declared when he lost his most intimate friend, Arthur Hallam, "I must lose myself in action, lest I wither in despair."
Most of us have little trouble losing ourselves in action while we have our noses to the grindstone and are doing our day's work. But the hours after workday are the dangerous ones. Just when we're free to enjoy our own leisure, and ought to be happiest, that's when the blue devils of worry attack us. That's when we begin to wonder whether we're getting anywhere in life, whether we're in a rut, whether the boss meant anything by that remark he made today, or whether we're getting bald. When we are not busy, our minds tend to become a near vacuum. Every student of physics knows that nature abhors a vacuum. The nearest thing to a vacuum that you and I will probably ever see is the inside of an incandescent electric light bulb. Break that bulb and nature forces air in to fill the theoretically empty space.
Nature also rushes in to fill the vacant mind. With what? Usually with emotions. Why? Because emotions of worry, fear, hate, jealousy, and envy are driven by primeval vigor and the dynamic energy of the jungle. Such emotions are so violent that they tend to drive out of our minds all peaceful, nappy thoughts and emotions. James L. Mersel, professor of education, Teachers College, Columbia, puts it very well when he says, "Worry is most apt to ride you ragged not when you are in action, but when the day's work is done." Your imagination can run riot then and bring up all sorts of ridiculous possibilities and magnify each little blunder. At such a time, he continues, your mind is like a motor operating without its load. It races and threatens to burn out its bearings or even to tear itself to bits. The remedy for worry is to get completely occupied doing something constructive.
But you don't have to be a college professor to realize this truth and put it into practice. During the war, I met a housewife from Chicago who told me how she discovered for herself that the remedy for worry is to get completely occupied doing something constructive. I met this woman and her husband in the dining car while I was traveling from New York to my farm in Missouri. Sorry I didn't get their names. I never like to give examples.